Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you're watching from. Welcome to Between Two Flags. It's so good to see you guys here. I hope you're having a really nice day. And yeah, we've got a couple of technical difficulties kind of going on in the background. So number one, our brand new fantastic musical intro wasn't being able to play. We couldn't get it going. So it's just me for the first couple of minutes. I do have my guests in the background. We have two Jasons here today. So if I say Vietnamese Jason, that's because that's my co-host, Jason Bainbridge, of course. And we have Jason LaFaci from Canada's Freedom Radio here in Canada, and Rob Torckler. I think I said that right. But yeah, from New Zealand, and he has a show that he does. He goes live, and it's called The Conversation. So I think what I'll just do is bring you guys both up. So welcome, Jason.
Thanks.
Welcome, Rob. Oops. Oh yeah, there's your comment, Jason. So how are you two doing today, this afternoon for you, Rob?
Oh, very well, thank you. And thank you for having me on this show as well. Don't get out of New Zealand very often, so good to be here.
And now you've got an audience in Canada, so that'll be nice. And yeah, for you, Jason, you're in Ontario, Sudbury, I believe, Northern Ontario.
Yep. Yeah, it's good out here. You know, we've got a lot of the forest fires and heavy smoke like everywhere else in Ontario, but other than that, it's good.
Other than that, not getting smoked out at all?
Oh yeah, we are. Oh yeah.
It's been a rough summer. It's been a hot summer. And Rob, whereabouts in New Zealand are you located? North Island, South Island?
I'm just south of Whangarei, which is north in the North Island.
It's kind of in the middle of the North Island, close to the. You guys have that big hill?
Whangarei is north of Auckland. It's about it's a couple of hours drive.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's about halfway between Auckland and the top city, Kaitaia.
So it looks like there he is. Yay, you made it, Jason. So nice to have you here, my favorite co-host in the world.
Yeah, my phone was having just a bit of a meltdown, but it looks like it's okay now.
Just so you know, Rob and Jason, we anytime we have any kind of technical difficulties, we always blame it on Jacinda.
And we've started shifting over to Trudeau as well.
Well, yeah, we can actually really blame Trudeau now for technical difficulties, seeing as Bill C-11 passed a few months ago, and now Bill C-18 has also passed, and it's getting harder and harder to get our voices out. So, oh, we've got Carl Barkley in the chat. It's nice to see you, Carl. And so, yeah,
Good afternoon, Carl.
It's fantastic. And of course, Dickard is here saying, "Oh, Bergiordo." So, may as well just go straight into it. So, both of you are very, I know, very political. Jason, you had a whole thing that you kind of started earlier this spring. You were last time I saw you was in Ottawa,
Yeah.
on the Hill,
Yeah.
and it was really nice. You yeah, you're just raising some awareness of what our options are when it comes to what we have an election this November. Is that what I understand?
Well, right now, like what I did in Ottawa was been studying the political system for Canada for quite a while and trying to figure out how to use the process to get the voice of Canadians to the forefront. And, you know, since the convoy, it seemed like nobody was going that direction, like actually tackling it. So what I did is I researched all the political laws for parliamentary system, the parliamentary procedures. And I found out that there is a clause in the parliamentary procedures of Canada for the House of Commons under Section 122 that grants the Governor General powers to dissolve government and remove a prime minister for unconstitutional governance. So what we did is we wrote a 60-plus page report handed it to the Conservatives in hopes that we could compel Pierre Poilievre with a petition and the report, and keep all the conspiracy stuff out of it. And we just focused on farmers, resources, what's actually happening to the Canadian collective as a whole, what's unconstitutional policies governing the country, causing harm to the population, and what's happening with our farmers out west. So I presented that to the Conservative Party, and basically sloughed us off. But Pierre Poilievre is running off that report right now. His campaign, a lot of it is from the report that we handed to them. And now I'm at a point where I believe that I think for Canada, the right direction is to start focusing on independent candidates solely and find a way to get the collective of this country to remove the political party landscape. The political party system is a failure in this country. It was never set up to have a party system. In our Constitution, it even states that there isn't a party system. It's individual representation. And I mean, when you look at that and you look at the changes and you see what the party system has done to our country, it's a mechanism. It's just public opinion that sways all the time in a circle. And if it's not favoring the Liberals, it's Conservatives. It's a back and forth thing. And there was a political system in Southern America or South America that collapsed because of it. It was similar to ours. So, someone should really look at the documentary called The Mechanism, and watch that documentary, and then you'll see a lot of what Canada could be if we don't act soon.
And Rob, yeah, I understand you've started a political party, the People's Opinion Party. So how is that going for you? Is that kind of the same idea? You're just trying to fix it from inside, or like completely give somebody a different give everybody a completely separate option, someone else to vote for? So
yeah, we began this whole thing wanting to know who's who in the zoo, and it occurred to us that it doesn't matter what a politician or a politician wannabe says. They're either working for the establishment, whether they know it or not, or else they're working for the people. And so we kind of narrowed things down quite considerably, where we figured it out, right or wrong, and we're always open for correction. But the established way of doing things is the way that things always seem to get done politically. And I agree with you, Jason, about the party system. We've come to the same conclusion here, that prior to 1891, we didn't have a party system. Whether we were meant to have a party system or not, I don't know, but it happened. And when you look at historically the way that the political parties in this country have rolled out, they've all merged and become one. Like, it's all there historically. It's it's not a conspiracy to say two wings of the same bird. It really is true. Yeah. And so we see the party system as being the reason why there's so much corruption. It's like an open door for corruption, and a minority are able to get so much influence within government because of the party system. Yeah. And when you look at this country at the moment, and I guess it's just about the same everywhere, but we have an over-representation of an extreme minority group that's fully influencing our government, fully influencing parliament, fully influencing our schools and our services. It's nuts. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, so we're using what we've got. We know that New Zealand will transition into a different type of governance. We know that's going to happen. It's inevitable. People have been talking about it. Even our Prime Minister is talking about it. Reckons he's going to turn New Zealand into a republic before he finishes his time. Well, he hasn't got much time to go. We have an election this year as well. But we've got. I just kind of feel that similar in a sense that looking at what we've got and how do we do something that's going to make a difference. And I took literally that saying that says, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. Well, this is what we started to look at with the established way of doing things. And we realized that the established way of doing things was set up that way by corrupt people. And so the established way of doing things is only set up to advantage the establishment, never the people. And so we had to do something that hadn't been done before in order to try to achieve something that hadn't been achieved. And when you look at the parties that have started up since March the 2nd, since the occupation here in New Zealand, they're all doing it the way that parties always do it. Matt King, with Democracy NZ, he has set up that party the established way of setting up parties. Even Leighton Baker, who's come out now, he's going the same pathway. He's doing it the way that it's always been done. And so when you do things the way that it's always been done, how can you actually expect to change anything? How can you expect to achieve anything? So rather than us panicking, even though we started a year ago and originally we were going to be contesting this general election, we figured out pretty quickly, not a good idea. Not a good idea at all. And people said at the last election, prior to the last election, oh, we're not going to make it to the next election, but we did. They said the same thing about the election before that. Oh, we're not going to make it to that election, but we did. They've said the same thing about the election this year. We're not going to make it. On the other hand, people are also saying this is probably the most important election we've ever had. Well, I don't believe it is. I think 2026 might be the most important election we've ever had. Maybe 2029. Their agenda is to 2030. So we're committed through to 2030. We're going to see this through, which means we've got 3 elections to do it in. And the first election, well, that's where we sit back and we watch, we observe, we see what everyone else is doing. At the same time, we've been also working to try to set up communication between various groups. We had the same thing. We approached a number of the minor parties about getting together and forming some sort of coalition. We started talking grand coalition back then because, and in our mind, what a grand coalition is that the minor parties get together and they put forward one candidate for each electorate, and that candidate is promoted as the people's choice. So everyone who knows, we're looking for what's the strategic vote, which is the one that's most likely to get in, which is the one that we'd trust the most. It's a hard road, really is. And so one candidate per electorate, and also one party takes the party vote. We've got MMP here, which means the party vote is pretty important. And then everyone knows who to vote for. Simple. And you don't really need all of the minor parties on board, but you do need a quorum of minor parties in order to make something like that work. But you know what? The appetite for this sort of thing among the minor parties is about as low as the appetite for politics is among freedom movement people.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So New Zealand functions on the similar Commonwealth parliamentary system that we do, I believe, correct?
Yeah,
we're
supposed to be a parliamentary democracy, which is the Westminster style. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we have an idea in Canada that might work, but it's to compel Canadians to do this. It's similar to what you're saying, but you guys, from what I'm understanding, is you guys have your own minority political groups that act sort of similar, like as an independent candidate, as what we would say here in Canada, because that's how my understanding I got a little bit from that. What we want to do here in Canada is similar. We need proper representation for the people and individuals in each electorate district, so our EDAs. But what we want to do is to form a coalition of independent candidates across the country, because there's 341 districts. And out of the 341, if we were to use the freedom movement, use all our freedom groups productively to knock on doors, we could potentially win a majority on the next election if it was done right. But it's like you said, it's like we have this time frame, because we're in the same situation as New Zealand in terms of time frame because of the 2030 agenda. We're on the same track. We're on the same time track. So when we look at this, we're saying, okay, well, the only way out for Canadians, realistically is if we stop focusing on these minority groups, because Canada's parliamentary system, when they speak and say that Canadians as a majority speaks on behalf for a political party, it's just the voter base. And the voter base in Canada only consists of 23 to 24, maybe 26% of Canadians out of 40 million people. So out of that, you have 12% out of the voter base that makes up the decisions for this country. And out of that 12% is a focus on 4% minority group, which is completely focused on LGBTQ beliefs, minority group like that, you know what I mean? So what we want to do is we need to get form independent 341 electorate candidates and electorate districts. And then if we were to really do it right, we could get independents as a coalition and then call for a national referendum for national reform on our parliamentary system. Because right now, the only way that Canadians would have a say is to actually have independent candidates to speak on our behalf. The party system is so corrupted and so colluded with corporations. I mean, here in Canada, you can spend $50,000 to $250,000 and buy yourself an MPP that's a sitting minister to get what you want. And now that's public knowledge now. That just came out, a few months ago. So this whole time for the last decade since Trudeau's been in, that's what's been happening. We see these minority groups hyper focused on allyship programs, and what they do is they go right to the government, boom, buy off, and then look at the mess that's created in our collectives right across the world. So I mean, I think another thing we should look at too in terms of the ideologies being pushed out, a lot of it, like if you look at today with the disruption in Canada, a lot of it's the gender stuff with the kids, and that's a big thing right now. So when you look at countries like Sweden led the way in gender politics and transitioning for a long time, and then they just halted it this year. Like it's done with. They are not offering it to their youth no more. They're not offering it to people no more because the science is showing that it's causing more harms to human beings, infections. There was not enough research to justify the means, and instead of focusing on real science, and I'm just using this as an example, by the way, instead of using real science to justify a result that we all should be focused on, it's quasi-science now. It's minority quasi-thinking, and it's people-kind science. You know what I mean? So I don't know, and I find that more and more now in countries like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, like all our Commonwealth countries, we're seeing the hyper focus of minority. How can I say that? Influence by minority groups to government officials, and it's causing great harm. It is actually causing great harm.
It's biblical. Bible says in these days they'll call good evil and evil good.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. What's your take?
It's a huge psychological mess. I mean, really. I mean, I was sitting there watching. There was a video. I guess it was YouTube, and there was a street preacher on the street preaching, and this woman went on for like 20 minutes, and every time he challenged her way of thinking, she would just start screeching, just like literally screaming. Like this is probably a middle-aged woman, 20, 25 years old, somewhere around that age, and not even able to have a conversation, just literally screaming her lungs out every time her worldview was challenged by the street preacher. It's absolutely insane. Psychologically, what they're doing to the planet, really, the people who are really susceptible to this, I guess the general consumers, the people who are very easily led into getting jabs and wearing masks and that sort of thing, those types of people, it's going to take probably a couple of decades to recover from this. They have to start now. They have to start pulling back on this right now.
Well, big time. You know what this reminds me of this time frame? I believe like traditional Aboriginal tribal beliefs. Like I've been, stories that were told to me from elders and stuff. And the last year I worked with this elder named Lester Howes, and he's a very well-known elder about the real history of the land in Canada and the people that were here first. And he was telling me that, he majored in history, and he was explaining to me that in the Dark Ages, they were mutilating each other. They were trying to put dog heads on humans, human heads on dogs, doing all this crazy nonsense. And if you sort of look at today with the body part, like, it's just all this modification, all this RNA science that in the future they're gonna focus and hyper focus on it as a market, because they said that in the next 10 years it's going to be a $5 billion a year revenue stream for this kind of stuff. So it's like it's like a modernized Dark Ages of today. You know what I mean? It's crazy stuff. And I wouldn't even doubt if they're cloning humans if they're doing this stuff. Right?
Here's an observation that we've noticed here in New Zealand, and we think it's because of the sexual relationships program that they're pushing into the schools. We've basically got, I think we've got about 3 weeks left before we've got about 3 weeks to get organised and get stuff into the board of trustees for the schools in this country, because they've got the schools have been given until the end of this year to basically set in stone to institutionalize this sexual relationships program that they've got. And it's the thin edge of the wedge. They put out a brochure for it, but it has links on it. The brochure itself is kind of nebulous, but the links take you to what the education's all about, and it's absolutely horrific. But you've probably seen it. I don't even want to talk about it. It's that bad. What the observation is that the age group of 25 to 35 are waking up, because this is happening to their kids at school now. And I've been saying that the future that we've been saying, what sort of future we're going to leave for our children's children. That's why we're doing this. I've been saying that time is now. We're actually in that time now, because it's our my age group. It's our grandchildren who are, we're still alive, and this is happening, and it's our children, our vulnerable children from age 5 to about 14 are going to be subjected to this sort of indoctrination, sexual indoctrination.
Yeah,
and
they dropped the age groups.
Yeah, it's just nuts. And so it's kind of like, we know, like all of the problems that get presented to us, that being a major issue, but all of the problems that get presented to us, they're like cobwebs, because behind all of those problems, there's another problem. And they are distractions, but we have to face them anyway. I mean, it's like, not many political parties in this country are going to take this one on like what we're going to take it. We're taking it on because we're not consumed by campaigning for the general election. We're consumed by doing what needs to be done, really. And so we've got to take this on, and we've got to do whatever it is that we can to get the message out there to, because people don't know. People don't know. They just don't know. Like, I'm in touch with a lot of people who, I don't know what do we call them, the normies? I just call them everyone else, or the rest of us, basically, and they have no clue what's going on. And to get the message out there, it's almost as though, look, we're up against a beast that's uncontrollable. You can't tame it. You can't contain it. You can't do anything. You have to, well, I'm just of the opinion that we're in a battle. We know we're in a battle, that we're doing what we're doing. We're not willing warriors. We're reluctant warriors, but we're warriors all the same, and we're fighting. And it doesn't matter what we call ourselves. It doesn't matter what banner we come under. The fact is that we're all heading in the same direction, and that is to deal with what has been perpetrated on the entire human race. It's not just our country or your country. It's friggin' everywhere.
Yep.
And somewhere or the other, there are weaknesses within this beast, and it'll be in the underbelly. There'll be an undoing, and maybe we'll find it, maybe we won't. It doesn't really matter. But the problem is so big that it's not one individual can deal with it on their own. Not one political party is ever going to have the answer. And I agree with you about independent representation. And that's how a republic works.
Yeah,
really.
I think that's what we should all like. When you look at our Commonwealth countries, we were built on the common law practice of Magna Carta and the parliamentary system imposed by the UK. But we're at a point now that it's failed us. It's corrupt. Yes, we have to go independent. We need republics in our countries. It would function much better independently, so that people actually have a true democracy for its republic. But again, like touching on the stuff with the kids and the education curriculum here in Canada, like especially in Ontario, when I was growing up, like I'm going to be 50 next year. So when I was growing up, we didn't get taught sex ed until grade 7. And we were 13, 14 years old, starting to get taught sexual education, which was normal. And it was basic sexual education about birds and the bees and protecting yourself, because back then AIDS was a big thing. Remember, like they were teaching us about, well, if you drink 5 pails of saliva, you'll get AIDS. I mean, it was the big thing back then. But now it's progressed, because over the years, they've monetized it for living off that. They get funded by taxpayers. And the curriculum's completely changed. So, when I was in grade 7, I remember the public health would come in, or your sex education teacher would come in. You'd do a half an hour lesson, and then you're off to the gym, or you're in the schoolyard doing football or some recreational activity, part of phys ed. Now it's got to the point where they've dumbed it down. I've seen there was a school here in my city, grade 3 students, 8, 9-year-old kids, 10-year-old kids, being taught a sexual curriculum that's a little bit, explicit for a young child at that age. And then to trump that off, now we have this evil, like I don't consider it like, I don't want to sit here and say that I'm against pride or anything, because I'm not. I believe everybody should be who they want to be and stuff. And yes, the Pride community at one point was a very loving and inclusive community and brought a lot of good stuff, but it's been politicized in a way now and inflamed to the point that it's radicalized. And you can't communicate with these people when you bring up the points about, hey man, I'm a parent, I don't want this being taught to my kid. Well, then they turn around and it's like, well, all these save trans kids. So it makes it makes no sense. There's no logical explanation to their argument, because in Canada we have a law when it comes to transitioning for youths that they're protected, and even under the or what was it, the new LGBTQ laws, the anti-hate laws, they're still protected from bullying. So now what they run on is you see these protests here in Canada, and you have hundreds of these counter protesters screaming, save trans kids. So when I was in Ottawa last time, Rosie was there. We went to the protest at the school board in Ottawa, and I got there, and the first thing I said to the counter protesters, I asked them this question. I said, can you please explain to me, someone, you guys are all screaming, save trans kids. Can you explain to me how many kids are in school in Ottawa that account for the trans community, for these kids that have actually transitioned in elementary schools? And the answer to that is 0. So when I presented that information to them, they come back and it's not transitioning, it's they identify. Okay, so now we're going to one extreme to another. When we point out the facts to them, they jump to another thing. So it's like, I truly believe there's a mental health aspect to this whole thing.
Oh yeah.
In Canada, I'll explain. I'm sure you guys will all agree with this. In Canada, back in the late 90s, the federal and provincial governments made cutbacks to the asylums, the mental asylums in our country. They released all the people that they thought weren't a threat. Immediately when that happened, that same year, one of these people who got released was on a Greyhound bus and cut a guy's head off. And then ever since, we've had generational, right? So all these people have had kids. Now, when you really look at the grand scope of things, it's like, you know what they're doing with the kids right now to justify the outcome of the future? It's the same thing they did with the mental health aspect of things. After so many years, you know, there's going to be a problem that's going to start to create, and generational, you're going to have kids that not getting the help for mental health. They're losing their shit. You know, they're on consoles all day. Their parents are not paying attention to them. So I don't know. I think that there's a huge problem in the private sector in terms of government funded and taxpayer funded workers. Those sectors need to be really looked at. The healthcare sector, especially when it comes to mental health, the corporations need to step aside and let our healthcare system do its job, because you got Bell Media, who inflames a campaign called Bell Let's Talk, and then they prop up and virtue signal the despair of people's depression and stuff like that, and they prop that up as if it's glorified. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand that. I just never understood that kind of stuff. But we need change, and I know every country across the world's affected the same way right now. And World Economic Forum, man, we all know it.
The big question is why? Why? I mean, it kind of reminds me of the days of Caligula. The end of his reign. You know, he was a complete, absolute perv. And I'm just kind of thinking that this is what happens. Well, because we can kind of see it just continually reoccurring. Once they get so much power, they've got to the point where they now control every aspect of a person's life. They just become overly decadent, and it's like, it's not human. It doesn't, like, I'm not saying they're aliens or anything, but it's not human. None of this stuff feels human at all. It's completely incomprehensible what they're doing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm surprised why parents are not, like, people in my own family and friends and all that. It's all, yeah, let's wave the banner, shall we? But it's absolute perversion. That's all it is in a nutshell. It's
There's
a bunch of pervert parading around as middle class citizens.
Oh, big time. You know, you said it's almost alien-like, right? Because it's not human. So listen to this. I don't know if anybody, you guys, watch Ancient Aliens. Some people go down the rabbit hole, but I believe in aliens, right? I do believe in that stuff. But there's a theory, and it came from an MIT professor. Okay, it was I think it was like 6 to 8 months before COVID started. There was an object that came hyperbolic orbit into our solar system that's never been seen before, ever in humanity. And scientists tracked this thing, and it sped up when it went around the sun, and it took off. Now, this thing wasn't a rock. They said some MIT professors are saying it was a probe. But there's a side theory right now amongst intellectuals, like people that do computer sciences, astrophysics and stuff. I have a major in computer sciences, so me and my friends, we talk about this quite a bit now. And now think of this theory. I know it's out there, but it's a theory. This object that came through space, it came very close to Earth. It came at a speed that was a speed we've never seen before, an object we've never seen before, and at a orbit we've never seen before. It was totally unexplainable. Now, when you have MIT professors who say, hey, this could be potentially alien, this is alien technology coming through a probe, checking out maybe what's going on here on our planet, because we're loud in space. That's a fact. Now, the theory is potentially, do you know that when a human being dies, there's 7 ounces of our weight that unexplainably just disappears? That's a science that you can look up, and it's true. There's an unexplainable 7 pounds of our weight that mysteriously disappears. When people say it's our soul. However, just theorize this. Let's think for a second that if these people are far advanced, okay, in another solar system, they come through our solar system and they've mastered the soul, being able to move from a life force to another, and they're super advanced. Now, let's, in theory, they come here. What's the best way to take over a world? Host your leaders. Force the rest of the population to comply. Easiest way to do it in a technology and a modern time of today. Otherwise, because we can't have mass deaths. I mean, it would be a bloodbath. But it's a theory. I don't believe in all of this theory, but it's something that's pretty out there. And when you think about it, and you think of all the madness that's happened since COVID started, since this object has come in our solar system. And now it's starting to be talked about between, people within scientific communities and stuff. So it's something to keep an eye on. I don't think it's true, but it's a theory that's not really far-fetched. I just think humanity is just not ready for it, if it was true.
Yeah, there is talk about this sort of thing, and it's on the line. There's a line between spirituality, and of course you've got your mainstream spiritualities. You've got Christians, Muslims, all this kind of stuff, and then you've got the alternative spirituality. And if people have watched my documentary, they'll know that I was actually involved in a cult actually when I was younger, and dealing, and very similar to Reiki, Japanese Reiki, and it was a Japanese religion, and we were dealing with healing people and manifesting what was attached to them. So there's that space as well, which people have witnessed as well. And the debate is, are these things, what they call the fallen angels, or are they aliens, or are they the same thing, or what is it? But definitely this is not like from a human mind.
Yeah.
Well, it could be, but a very sick one. It's
Yeah.
very sick. Whatever it is extremely sick.
Oh,
And
it
they're targeting the most vulnerable, because they're engineering them. They're socially engineering them. So we get a society now full of children who are transitioning, and the long-term danger is that they're transitioning into very dangerous people with psychological problems, and soon when they inherit the earth, they're going to be a majority and not a minority as they are now.
Yeah.
This is the long-term problem.
Yeah. Well, look at Sweden there. They just cut off the gender conversion completely, because the studies were showing that the kids, as they transition, when they get older, so 25 to 30-year-old kids that are transitioning from a younger age, their heart, when they die, their hearts are the size of a 12-year-old. So there's and their lungs are not being fully developed into adulthood. So these are things that we have to keep away from our kids. If an adult chooses to make that transition, then let him do so. That's his choice or her choice. But when it comes to our kids, they're too young. And personally, my opinion on the transitioning as a whole, just as a human being, I'm a person who says, just don't fuck with God. You don't screw around with creation. Don't screw around with our anatomies, in a sense that it's like I think it's blasphemy. When I look around at humans and animals as a whole around all of our environment, you don't see a confusion between animals like you do with human beings. And that's just because of intelligence. That's it. So it's a behavior that needs to change. And you're right. It's sick. It's demented, really.
Yeah, there's an interesting comment here. I'm just going to post that up. One of our people in the live chat said, "My daughter with my 3 grandkids thinks it's just sex education." Yeah, that's it. And I have a Facebook group with over 1,000 of the primary school students when I was primary school. I am 50, so you're almost 50. I am 50. So we're going way back now, 40 years ago. And I spoke to one of the teachers there, who was a previous head principal, and they don't want to talk about it. They want to stay away from it, because they're already retired, and now it's they just don't want to talk about it. This is very worrying. And I'm very vocal in that group, and it's got to the point now where I've just said to the school, I said, look, this is my group. So if you want to actually start another official group, you can go ahead and do that. And they have actually gone ahead and started their own official Facebook group, because I can't be quiet about it. Unfortunately, it's taken 10 years to develop a group like that, and it's a danger zone. But the teachers themselves are ducking and hiding from it.
Yeah. Well, they're not getting paid anymore. They just want to retire, right? I understand that people, like, when you look at how people are being silent on the issue, especially from the education system, you know, one, it's people who are currently working and they're afraid to lose their jobs because they're being persecuted at work with threats or whatever, right? If they speak up, and then those who have retired, well, it's I don't know, but we need them to speak up, because like I've spoken to previous teachers, even a teacher that I used to have, and they don't agree with the current curriculum either. They think it's a little bit out there, and I've asked them to speak up, and oh no, I can't do that. I just can't do that. You know, my friends, like I don't understand how popularity and is more important than protecting our children.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of it is just the government has been infiltrated, and it has a lot of overreach.
Yep.
And I kind of want to bring that back to what we touched on earlier with you and Rob, talking about a republic, because you know what I've always thought was the only real solution is you know, the original design of what the US was based on as a constitutional republic. And I was kind of thinking about this, and why would Ardern and Hipkins want to take New Zealand into a republic, Rob? That I was wondering, and I was very curious about what their motivation would be behind it, because wouldn't that benefit New Zealand to be decentralized away from the monarchy and to be a constitutional? Well, no, question number one: are they talking about a republic or a constitutional republic? And what are the differences that you understand?
Well, firstly, whatever it is that we do, we have to go down that democratic pathway, because the democratic pathway is the only pathway of peace that we've got. And so we've been actually trying to figure out what democracy is. Like, if you look up Wikipedia and what sort of governance does New Zealand have, it'll tell you that it's a parliamentary democracy, but we don't have a parliamentary democracy, and we haven't had a parliamentary democracy in this country since 1950.
Yeah, that's about the same time as us.
It was in 1950 that Sidney Holland, who was the Prime Minister of the National Party, we used to have an upper house, right? So in 1950, Sidney Holland stacked the upper house. What used to happen is that the members of the upper house would serve a term of 7 years to life, and so there was always supposed to be a mixed representation of the parties, I guess, within the upper house. And when a new government came in, they nominated members for the upper house, and on this particular occasion, they stacked the upper house. The Labour Party knew what was going on. They called this group of people the Suicide Squad, and they weaponized democracy against democracy and voted to dissolve the upper house. And the upper house, that's where the Legislative Council was, and the Legislative Council really was the only thing standing between the people and a potentially corrupt government, because all legislation had to be passed in the upper house by the Legislative Council before it could be enacted. And then what they did is they passed the powers of the Legislative Council down to the Executive Council, which is in the lower house. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we have a government today that can do whatever it wants. They go through the process with their legislation, they put their parliamentary hat on, and then those who are in the Executive Council, when they've gone through that process, they take the parliamentary hat off, they put their Executive Council hat on, and they pass it. And so they can do that without having to involve people, without having to involve any democratic process within Parliament or any democratic process among the people. That's why we've got a government like that. This is what I said before about it is a fact that that is absolutely true. It is one entity, one political entity that's been coming at the people all along, left or right, it makes no difference. It's the same body. And in this country, don't know what it's like there, but here, they conspired in 1950 and did this. And as if that was bad enough, in 1951, the same group of people set up their own realm. And we know that because it's written throughout legislation that they'll put in that legislation according to our realm of X number of years. And when you count back the years, it always goes back to 1951. So they've created their own realm. They've already taken us out of the monarchy, and they did that in 1986 when they corporatized New Zealand. I mean, that was just a ratification of something that had already happened. So we don't have democracy in our parliament. We know that. And what the democracy that we do have in this country is a perceived democracy. It's not an actual democracy. We already have a republic going. It's a socialist republic, and it's a minority who are ruling, a minority of people who are ruling. Look up the meaning of the word republic. A republic is where the people control government, and that control can happen via direct democracy, where everyone has a say and there are no leaders, or it can happen through representative democracy, which is what we've got here. We vote others in, we elect others to represent us democratically. And so there are all types of democracy, and that's a part of our discussion at the moment, trying to figure out what democracy actually is. And we've come to the conclusion that it's not, so far anyway, that it's more than just one person, one vote. That democracy is a position within here of all inclusive. As soon as one individual or a group of individuals stand up and say this is how it's going to be done, you have no democracy. You don't have it. And so that's why when you've got political parties who are doing things without any democratic process, then they're just doing it the way that it's already been established to be done. And it's a much harder road doing things democratically, actually truly democratically, than what it is any other way. So we're trying to figure out what actually democracy is. And you mentioned it a couple of times, Jason. Not the Jason up there, but the Jason down here. How long will be versed on my but,
that one.
Over there. I'm pointing the opposite way, but I'm getting you over there on my screen anyway. We think it's really, really important to find out what democracy really is. And the way that we've been working it is, well, what's not democracy? What is it that's not democratic? And so we listed things, a less accountability, less transparency, less responsive, all of these things, which is what we've got. And so we can reverse the things that aren't democratic and go, well, if we've got transparency, we've got democracy. If we've got responsiveness, then we've got democracy. If we've got accountability, if we've got truth, we've got democracy. All the opposites to that are not democracy: lying, covering up. You try to get something done, they're non-responsive. They don't respond. At our occupation in Wellington, not only did none of the Parliament come out to talk with us, but they signed a bloody agreement saying that they wouldn't come out and talk with us. I mean, what? Democracy. We don't have a democracy here, and somehow we go into the general election thinking that we do have a democracy and thinking that we're all running around doing the same thing we've always done. And I predict we're just going to get the same result.
Can I make a comment? I'm wondering, well, it's actually more of a question. What do they gain aside from the obvious social control of keeping up the farce of belonging to the crown? What's if the country, as we know, already is a corporation and it's been detached from the monarchy? What do they gain from continuing the farce and making people believe that they're still a part of it? I mean, there must be some kind of advantage to it.
It's called economic social control, and how it works is like this. The economies of the world today it's like a theater of economics. Okay, so just think of it in that sense. De facto corporations built on the principle of the monarch system. It's just an illusion for us. In Canada, our country is actually a registered corporation in Washington that hands our fiscal annual reports to the IRS and to the Treasury Board. So in a sense, when you look at the paperwork that's registered in the States as a corporate Canada, Canadians are shareholders, and it's a continuous flow of shareholders because of the birth rate every day. So every person born every day in Canada has an estimated value of $100,000 now. It used to be 25,000 before, and it's going up slightly. So it might even be over 100,000. So they progress a lifespan of 70 years per Canadian on a basic investment of fictional, life essence, which is a value set to us by a registration number, and that's all it is. So the banking system is just connected to a fictitious system. that is the why they keep control. And then as they keep on going, it's just money, right? So it spirals out of control. And then you have corporate entities who are profiting more than countries now, who are now buying out our politicians, and it's just got so corrupted that I think there's no way of saving the current system. I truly believe that every country that was once on the monarch parliamentary system should be now republics. A true democracy is this. In electoral districts, okay, so in Canada, as an example, Canada is going to have 341 electoral districts for our country starting on the next federal election. So a true democracy is if we had independent people, no party system, and it's voted by their community. So their community has a couple candidates and they vote out of the pot who would be the best person to represent them out of that. Now also add a recall legislative act to that, so that every year they're actually reviewed by their electoral district to see if they're doing their job correctly. And if they're not, they can have a by-election and snap another person in to do the job for the people. That's a true democracy. Because right now, it's a fictional democracy in Canada, whereas you have the three major party system, but it sways to two. And when you look at who goes out and votes, majority of Canada, we have almost 80% of Canadians don't vote. Parties fail. Why do we have elections? It would be something. There should be a law that says if 50% of the population doesn't go out to vote, then we don't have an election, or we do something about it. We call it reform or something. I don't know. But, we should have a minimal requirement that's necessary to have choices made and votes done. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on with about New Zealand, and you said you have executive council that makes decisions for the government, and it's always the same people and so on. We have that here in Canada. It's called the King's Privy Council. And basically it's made up of previous prime ministers, sitting MPs, sitting ministers that were there before, and current ones. And when they make legislative changes to laws, instead of doing it like they're supposed to, they vote it to the King's Privy Council onto their membership that votes, and there you go. They amended our Elections Act. So Elections Canada, the reason why Canadians don't have a voice anymore, is the fact that the King's Privy Council has rescinded a bunch of sections under the Canadian Elections Act, Canada's Elections Act, which prevents Canadians to fight back and have a voice, believe it or not. And that was the King's Privy Council that made those changes starting the first day that Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister.
So that was his first order of business then?
Yep. Modify the election. Yep.
Right. Well, it seemed to be everybody's major motivation once they got into power. Before all of this stuff came down, and obviously they used COVID as a tool here to propel this thing along forward.
Yeah.
During taking out all the elections, dominating them with their technology, putting everybody in place, as Schwab says, infiltrating all the governments, and then setting forth their agenda. So well, Rosie, you wanna have a little say?
Between my brother's dog barking upstairs and Danny boy playing with some toys by my feet, I just thought it'd be easier to mute. And
I was wondering what that shadow was running around your room.
It's my cat. Yeah, that's Danny boy. He's settled down now. I think he's played long enough, but
a smart thing I think Canadians should do right now, this would be smart. Now, Canada has a tool for us Canadians to compel MPs to speak on our behalf, and that's with the House of Commons petitions. I ran one petition. I think what people should focus on is everybody put petitions in the same sort of thing, demanding that those who they're asking to represent the position to call on the Elections Canada to deplatform the Liberals for political interference that affected our elections, because China colluded, and they paid off people. They targeted MPs and threatened some of our sitting members of parliament, all to interfere with our electoral process. And really, by law, that would, when it comes to political interference as such, there's a law in the Elections Act that says that these parties should be penalized and deplatformed. I mean, we've had political parties deplatformed for less, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the Liberal Party should be completely deplatformed. None of their members should be allowed to run for the next election for one term. Just do it for one term, and I think that would give the ability for Canadians to vote who they want. But that'll never happen. You know what I mean? Like, I tried, and they just laugh at us.
Can I you mentioned petitions, and how do petitions work in Canada? Because they don't work here.
Well, some do, some don't, but it depends. Like, what we've been noticing now is there's this hard lean on so let's say if a guy like me, I'm very outspoken, and I look at social injustices of our communities, and then I'll run a petition to try and correct it. They never work because they don't want to hear that they're the problem. But then if you have a minority group who has very little support, is a minority group, but heavily concentrated by government and politicized, if they run a petition, they get anything they want and the funding to do it. So really, there's a lot of, it's biased, right? It's favoritism. It's not right. It's not democracy, that's for sure.
Yeah, what we've, the thing about petitions here in New Zealand is, of course, since all this madness began 3 odd years ago, we've had dozens and dozens and dozens of petitions online. They all come through, sign this petition, sign this petition. And petitions have never really worked here, unless, of course, the government want to do it. It doesn't nothing changes. And we saw that here in this country a long time ago when we had the homosexual law reform bill that came out. There was a petition that went up and down the country. They collected 800,000 signatures, which is pretty big for this country. It was the largest show of solidarity that this country had ever shown. And all of these signatures were in boxes. They put the boxes onto the steps of Parliament, went into the House, and invited politicians to come down and have a look at it. A few of them came out. Some of them, they kicked the boxes. One of them picked up a petition from off the top, looked at it, and said, "Who are these people? I don't know these people," and put it back on top of the box, and they all walked out, and that was the last of it. Now, the reason why that happened is because the petition was done nationwide, and it wasn't done electorate by electorate. If a petition like that had been done electorate by electorate, then the petition gets presented to your representative, and when that happens here in New Zealand, they must read that petition out in Parliament. So it's something. But the way we see to pressure government and Parliament is through the individual MPs, and we do that through their electorates. And so one of the reasons why we're taking longer to be known as a political party in this country is because we're wanting to work deep, and we're wanting to work broad before we really sort of step out. And the reason why we wanted to do that is because we know that we have to set up a strong lobby group. We know we have to. There's no other way. We have to be the lobby group that gets its voices heard. We might not have the money, but we've got the numbers. We know it. It's just a matter of getting together and getting organized. And it's easier to say that, way easier to say just a matter of getting together and getting organized. Way easier to say that than it is to do. And anyone who's tried knows it.
Yeah.
So we keep saying it's going to get worse before it gets better, because we know that, we know what it is that woke us up. It was what we saw going on around us. Yeah. And so people are
just for context here, for the folks who don't know exactly what you're referring to, it's a People's Opinion Party, isn't it? POP.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if that was mentioned earlier on in the intro, because I came in a little bit late. So just for the viewers out there who are not sure, Rob, you've been working on a structure for a political party. That I understand that much, right? So how
Yeah.
far in, how far in down the, how far away do you think it is before you could take it live?
Our campaign for our election campaign for 2026 begins the day after the general elections here this year. That's when our campaign begins for 2026. So up until that point, we are observers. We are trying to help people. We're trying to work with people. We're trying to be the best that we can. And one of the reasons why we're not contesting for this election is because we made it our vision to stop the vote splitting. So it's a matter of integrity. We tried to get minor parties together. They just weren't interested. And one of the reasons why they weren't interested is because we're just newbies on the scene. So these people have been doing it for a long time, even though we're actually not newbies, because we've been in this. I've personally been in it since mid-90s. I began expressing myself politically to political leaders. Anyway, beside the point. And so we kind of saw that things have to play out. We predicted, perhaps not so loudly, about how this general election is going to happen. We want the people to get over the line, but we know that 5%, which will a 5% party vote, or one MP from a minor party getting in, will give us several MPs in there, but it won't be enough. We know that. But just another reason why we're not contesting this. There's no point. The only way that we're ever going to get ourselves in this country, in my opinion, in a place where we can actually make the changes that we all know need to be made, is for the people to landslide themselves far enough over the line to be able to form their own government. That way we get control of the executive council. And I know they don't like hearing this, but it's the truth. If the people don't do what needs to be done in order to landslide over the line with numbers, then we're just doing what we've always done. And parties that have got over the line here with 5% in the past, where are they today? The only parties, which is other than Labour and National, which is the Greens, ACT, and the Māori Party, the only parties, those three parties that have actually managed to stay in Parliament, we believe, is because they've sold out. And you look at Greens sold out. They are so far removed from their original support base, it's not even funny. We don't know who ACT is. We just really don't know. We don't know much about that party. It only ever comes out and talks to us in an election year, for goodness sake. So clearly they've sold out. They're a part of the whole thing.
I wonder if the problem is China, just like what Canada is, because Canada's problem right now is Chinese interference and World Economic Forum interference. And it's funny that back when the UN assigned, who was it? It was Korea's leader, I think it was, to represent the UN back in I think it was early 2000s or mid 2000s. I can't remember.
Yeah, anyway, there was a Korean lead.
Yeah. He had ties. He had close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. When I seen that happen, I knew there was a big change happening, because that was the first time in history something like that happened to the UN with NATO and stuff, right? Leadership change and going to Asia Pac. So you look at today, and it's some people will say, well, that sounds racist, but it's really not. When you have a country that's purposely manipulating our elections, interfering with our politicians. I mean, it's right down to the school system. And but then when you look at the programming behind it, with the intelligence gathering that's been put out, it's almost like a mimic of the World Economic Forum, as if China and WEF is working hand in hand to deploy this nonsense to disrupt our countries, right? So I don't know. It's
Xi Jinping was just shaking hands with Bill Gates just the other day.
Yeah, I mean, and there you go. I mean, and that's another thing. You see all these countries, the tech countries, right, that Bill Gates heavily invested in the Middle East and that, they're all switching over to the yen. They dropped the US dollar, which in a way, I do believe that if every country focused away from moved away from the centralized banking system and had our own, based it on our own economy, our own dollar, like Africa is doing, in a way, I sort of believe that's the right way to go. But, we're allowing, there's so many dynamics that dictates how our countries operate. And I mean, economically, we rely on the US dollar. So that's heavily influenced by our neighbors, right? So we're just being bombarded, Canadians, and we're just sitting here taking it dry. Like, really, we are. Like, we need another. I have a question for New Zealand. So, Rob, when you guys did the convoy down there, the country, was it like Canada? Like, was the uprising in a majority of New Zealanders that came out to support the truckers when you guys convoyed, or was
Absolutely. The streets were lined, the overbridges were lined. So much food, people make food along the way. It was absolutely phenomenal. I wasn't a part of the convoy. I arrived in Wellington at the occupation. Well, I arrived in Wellington the week before, but I arrived at the site the day before. So I didn't get to experience the convoy itself coming down. So I was basically there to greet them when they got there.
So you would have a pretty good support base then for what you guys are trying to do in terms of targeting that demographic.
I heard within the first week that there was enough food had been donated to feed everyone who was there for 3 months.
Yeah, us too. We had tons of food.
Yeah, it was so similar because I watched you guys go to Ottawa, and you guys were only just there for a couple of days, and then New Zealand started theirs. I think it was the February 2nd.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
It was absolutely incredible. So I was watching the two different Facebook groups, one that Jason started. So that was the North Islands, where I was watching the North Island, and I was watching the South Island. It was a different Facebook group, and I was sharing what I could to the Canadian groups, and I was cheering them on from Canada, and I kept seeing Canadian flags being flown in among their convoy because they were supporting the Canadian truckers. And it was just one of the most incredible things I have ever got to be a part of. So, yeah, the same things, they got there. There was a cyclone that swept through, and they had some tougher times right at the very beginning because they're who was it? The Trevor Mallard.
Yeah.
Who was he again? He was a Governor General, or
let's not give him any energy. That guy.
You guys were pouring rain. That piece of garbage. He turned the sprinklers on to try to water you guys out, and then they started playing the Macarena on these giant speakers, and they played Baby Shark, and they played Let It Go from Frozen. They just played it in a loop, and they tried to drive everybody off the lawn that way. But instead, you learned the Macarena, and you started just dancing to it. So,
not only that, but at night time when we weren't moving around so much, they were blasting us with their weapons. Honestly, we were getting radiated from the moment we arrived. They didn't wait. They didn't. When we got that sound weapon thing on March the 2nd, of which I still have a like a permanent pain just in behind my ear from that, hasn't gone away. So damage was done. But leading up to that point, we were so radiated that we had iodine, like we had people running around plastering iodine on people, and like I had, there was one iodine application which was a very thick swipe across your wrist. They put this really thick, it was like a Marmite spread across my wrist, and before my eyes, within a case of in 2 seconds, it just went whoosh, disappeared, just disappeared into my skin. And the nurse was standing there, and I said, "Whoa." She said, "Yeah, it disappeared. Your body takes it in. The more you need it, the more your body takes it in." And that was the only thing that we had to combat the radiation that they were putting on us. We had, not long after the convoy, I was talking with a number of people, and I never followed it up, but there was a guy who was ex-military who said that the symptoms that people were experiencing from this was more like a gamma than a something else, some weaponry that this guy had had something to do with. So I think the truth will come out eventually, but what they did to us, the sprinkling in the water and the margarita, I mean, it was like that was nothing compared to what they were doing. We were people were coming up with big dark red splotches on their skin, underneath their skin, another sign of radiation poisoning. I had in the first week, I had 2 severe ulcers that formed on my tongue, both sides of my tongue. It was so bad that I could bear, it was painful to talk, and yet with all these new people that were coming in, they didn't know what was going on, and there was sort of a group of us who just of ourselves had decided to do this, but we were greeting people when they were coming in and sort of explaining the situation to them. And man, I was like, those things, it wasn't until I was there for about, it was over a week, and then one of the locals came and got me and literally dragged me away from the place. I was sleeping in the back seat of my car, dragged me away, took me to a bed, got me in a shower, got me some nutrient food, because I wasn't able to eat with the ulcers on my tongue. So I was struggling just getting one sausage down a day. It was madness. I wept for the first week there. Literally, it was so cathartic for me. Wept for a week. Didn't eat for a week. There was a guy there who was parked over the road. I walked up to him after about a week, and how's it going? And he goes, "You're a crackhead." I go, "What?" He says, "You don't eat, you don't sleep." I wasn't sleeping either. I just spent all night walking around, making sure everything was okay. And you don't eat, you don't sleep, you're on crack. Well, of course, he's a good friend of mine now, because that wasn't true. So that's going. But yeah, I mean, I'll just finish with this. Those who were there, this is the feeling from anyone who were actually at that occupation from start to finish. 10 years from now, we'll be thinking about that in the same way that people who were at Woodstock would be thinking about and talking about 10 years on. Absolutely amazing thing to see. The diversity was profound, and yet there we were with one common purpose. Well, there were those who wanted to end the mandate so they could go back to their lives. The rest of us were there to stop the madness. We were going to stay there until we did that. So, well, there wasn't exactly one common purpose, but we were all there.
Yeah, definitely. You're all there. There was a question here for you from, excuse me, who was it? Bush Writer. Question for New Zealand. Do you feel, Rob, that an election would really make a difference? In Canada, our civil service at every level is infected with global authoritarianism.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I agree with everyone who says that, because when we started this, brother Luke and I, who hopefully you'll get to meet Luke at some point. But anyway, when we started this, we were talking about voting with people, and honestly, man, it was like a common understanding. Everyone said the same thing. What's the point? Nothing changes. Oh, it only gets worse. So that's the general sentiment. The general sentiment in this country is that there is zero confidence in the voting system, zero confidence in the government, or any government that gets in for that matter. It just seems that if there appears to be some sort of confidence in this country, then it's propped up by something. It's not a natural thing. We don't have that confidence. The answer to the question is that if we keep doing things the way that we've always done it, no, it won't make any difference. Nothing will change. The beast will just keep marching forward, rolling out its agenda. But what will make a difference is if the people get organized and use the democratic system to their advantage. Like, hey, they used democracy to weaponize democracy against itself, to dissolve democracy in our parliament in 1950. Yeah. So why can't we use democracy to weaponize it somehow against whatever it is that's there? Because, look, it's so frustrating for me, because we're looking for how to get from A to B. A to B. A is where we are now. B is where we will be able to make the changes that we know need to be made. Like Jason, when you say, and I probably should have written it down, but when you say, if we did this, then that would be fine. And you're absolutely right. But we get to do that at point B. We don't get to do that now. Yeah. And when you say, yeah, but that'll never happen. Well, don't be be a little bit positive about this. Because if the people get control, then yes, that will happen. Because to say that will never happen is to say you doubt that the people will even get control. And what I've been saying here in New Zealand is that we've got to lift our vision higher. We really do. We can't go into this with some sort of thinking that that whatever it is we do, it's just going to be frustrated like anything we've ever done in the past. There's been a shift. We know there's been a shift. And a part of that shift is that things that didn't work prior to the shift will work now. Things that did work prior to the shift won't work now. And so this is one of the reasons why we've got to chop up what we're doing and look at it and be really honest with it and say, is this the way we've always done it? We've got to change our thinking about, have a little bit more belief in ourselves. This is what the message we're trying to get through here in New Zealand, that believe in yourself, just do it. And I don't think about what is coming according to what's been told to us by the narrative that's coming out of these, excuse my language, but these evil arsehole people who are not really people, they brought the narrative to us, and this is the narrative. And so we look at that narrative and we draw a line through it and go, shit, this is not good. But who among us is talking in terms of the way that it should be? Who's, like I say to people, describe to me what the world looks like that you would like for your children's children to be living in. Describe it to me. Because we need to get that picture in our head, hold that vision in our head, lift our vision higher. Don't be so fait accompli. Don't be so, it's going to happen and there's nothing we can do about it. Because if it's going to happen, there's nothing we can do about it. What are we even doing having this conversation, sort of thing?
Yeah.
I mean, we're here because we believe that we can do something about it. And so our words need to reflect that and not be so defeated. But it actually sounds like I'm coming down on you for saying these things, Jason, but I do the same to anyone here in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's just a frustration, brother. That's all it is. We've been dealing with it for so long that it's like a conditioning, right? So sometimes you're like,
yeah, it's absolutely that. And that's what we've got to break through. And this is how you do it. You aim for the moon. If you aim for the moon, you'll clear the pine trees. And I've been saying that here in New Zealand. The moon is everyone. It's all of us. We aim for everyone. And in that regard, we have no choice but to follow the democratic pathway, because the democratic pathway is all inclusive. It includes everyone. We give everyone has a right to have a say. Everyone has a right on this platform to speak their mind and give us their opinion. We've all got that right. And so we aim for everyone. And if we aim for everyone, we will actually find the pathway to clear the pine trees. And at the moment, we're standing down the bottom of the tree, looking at the top, the first branch, and that's our 5%. That's our hurdle. We just got to get over the line. We get over the line, we get our 5%, and then that'll be our foothold, and the next election will be more. No, because that's the way we've always done it. So it ain't going to work. We've got to do it differently. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to change the way we see it. We've got to be setting our sights up for just everything, and don't think that it can't happen. Think that it can happen, because if you can imagine a thing to be so, it can be so, and that's the truth. And so this is all a part of our message. Our message is, it's not look at me, I've got the answers. No, it's look, you have the answers. Every single one of us has the answers within us. That's it. That's the truth. We know what to do. And when it's kind of like we were going for and when we started this, we thought, well, we'll go for the no confidence vote. A vote for us is a vote of no confidence. We were even going to call the party the no confidence party. So at least there would be a place on the ballot with no confidence on it. I phoned up the Electoral Commission and I said, hey, how could we go down if we had a party called the no confidence party? And I was talking to legal there, and he's like, yeah, well, I'm not really allowed to sort of, I can't say, you just got to submit it. But he was going, so we changed it, and we thought, well, actually, that's quite negative. We're not going to go for the no confidence vote. We're going to go for the confidence in the people to get the job done vote. And so if we're going to go for that vote, then we've got to back ourselves, because we are the people. And we can't back ourselves and we can't back the people. So it's just kind of like we're backing the people, and in a way we're showing them how to do it just simply by backing ourselves and doing whatever it is that we feel to do.
So it sounds like what really needs to take place is a aggressive corporate takeover to solve the problem, to get it into the realm where you can actually start working on it. So you're going to have to deal with the corporate side of it first and absorb that. It's definitely that, an aggressive corporate takeover.
Well, I suppose the shareholders are rising up to have their say. You could look at it any way you like, but as long as it's if it's a peaceful pathway, I'm in.
Yeah, same here.
If it's not a peaceful pathway, then we need to have a discussion about that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm out, But I'm saying we need to talk about it if that's your pathway.
Yeah. No, I think as human beings, as a majority, I think a peaceful pathway is the right way to go. You know, I always said this when it comes to the our country's leaderships when they create wars. We have technology now. We have VR sets. Why don't we just get the politicians to play a game of Call of Duty and call it a day? You know what I mean? We're all that money we waste on war machines, we could be exploring space.
The whole world should wake and bake, and we'd have no problems.
Yes, sir. You got that.
And speaking of war, so so what Wagner was marching their way to Moscow, and then it turned out that the U.S. gave them $6.2 billion, and then they because the U.S. tried to get Wagner on their side to go against, because they're working for Moscow, to go against Moscow. So they sent a convoy out there, and then then it turned out that the whole thing was a farce, and they literally ripped off the U.S. for $6.2 billion, turned around, shook their hands with Moscow again, and turned around and went back to Belarus. So they're definitely wasting a lot of money. It's all about war. When it comes to war, it's all about the military industrial complex and making money. It's got nothing to do. You may as well just have them just sit on a really expensive console and just shoot each other up all day, and even send them to go and do the fighting, because this is how these people actually made it. And these are people who are running this entire system, right? You go all the way back. It takes us all the way back to the Rothschilds, back to the Battle of Napoleon, France versus England, right? The Battle of Waterloo. These bankers running both sides, renting out both rental armies to both parties, lending both sides money and selling both sides weapons, and they're the ones at the top, at the apex predators. They're the ones who are cashing in on all of this.
Yeah, there's two major military groups. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Rosie. Two major military groups as contractors in this world. The Paladin Group, which is used by NATO forces and most democratic countries like Canada, United States, that causes diplomatic hardships and domestic terrorism in the Middle East. You can look that up. Wagner was Russia's version of the Paladin Group. And like you said, the U.S. buyout of the Wagner Group was also, there's also information coming across intelligence now stating that Canada was involved in this buyout. Because prior to this whole thing happening, Canada made two major payments to Ukraine, which is believed to have been deferred to the Wagner Group when it was in excess of $1.1 billion from the Canadian government, right, from Freeland. So again, it's like you said, now they're buying off. If we're not buying off politicians, we're buying off armies.
It's corporate. Everything is corporatized. Sorry, Rosie, go ahead.
I just wanted to say something that we could definitely encourage them to spend their money on is maybe just a few more of those submersibles and a couple of trips down to the Titanic.
Couple more billionaires.
That was a people kind sub.
You want to go to the Titanic? Come on, guys. All the cool kids are doing it.
Oh my God! I wonder if that was just a virtue signaling stunt that they wanted to pull off or something to revive the. I don't know. All the stuff they do to us, man. The conditioning.
Yeah, certainly. Like you got to look at distraction as well. I mean, distraction is worth its weight in gold these days. There's so many things going down. What was going on last week? Geez, there's so much stuff going on last week. The impeachment, of Biden. And all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's all a part of distraction. It's a great art. It's a great art of distraction. And when you look at the design of that thing, I mean, it was not even designed to go to those depths. You just look at a traditional a pool piping system, and it had more bolts than that, and it doesn't have to go anywhere near those depths. So that thing was certainly not designed for that. So you don't know. I don't know. Well, was it real, or was it just a blue screen number training incident?
Yeah. You know what though?
Very naive to think that whole thing wasn't set up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a lot of video from when the war started. Like it was right after the convoy here in Ottawa. I came home and I think it was like the first week after they beat us up. And I was on Twitter and I was watching the attack happen from Russia, the missiles launching across the skies, hitting Ukrainian labs. And it's interesting to see the conditioning and programming they use with media, because what I was getting at was, you remember 9/11? Somebody mentioned it in the chat. It created a global, what do you call it? Psychosis. It did.
Yeah.
Because people were
psychosis.
and people were like so focused on it. Same thing with COVID. They managed to do it with COVID. Same thing. I mean, they made people believe with that world meter. That was the whole focus at the beginning, and they were jumping numbers like it was, it was all fictional. Like everything was fictional. I mean, I'm not saying that people didn't die from COVID either. I know that people did, but we have to look at, all the surrounding issues that go with that as well. But at the same time, when they were telling us, like I have family in Italy and I have family in New York, and when they were telling Canadians that there was mass graves being put on Staten Island and there was mass graves in Italy, I actually called my family members out there and they were like, it's all a lie. There is no mass graves. There is nothing like this happening. This is all a lie that your media is telling you. And that was the second week of COVID.
And there was a YouTuber going around New York. And like he would go to these places where they said they had the news stories, that there were all these bodies and all that. And this guy he was on like a moped or something, and he was just an electric vehicle, little EV moped, like a small thing, rolling around with his camera, and then just rocking up to these places and talking to the nurses, and the nurses are like, no, nothing going on here.
Yeah.
Right. And this is straight off the back of all these news stories. This guy's cruising around the city, looking for all of these dead bodies, and all these, overwhelmed healthcare system, and the place was dead quiet.
Yeah, it's the same thing in Canada. Somebody took the initiative to start a group on Facebook called Film Your Hospitals, because COVID starts and everybody's like lockdown, and the next thing you know, everybody's scrolling through TikTok watching nurses dance around, and there's a pandemic going on. So people actually started going into the hospitals throughout Ontario, and I mean, there's thousands of videos showing no activity, nothing going on. It's just a lie. But we're anti-vaxxers and we're plague rats, right?
Yeah, we are indeed. Folks, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I'm just going to quickly there's one more comment here by Big Dice. What did he say? He's one of our regulars. I thought they were going to say Putin blew that up and let's call it a false flag. Well, yeah, that was the original plan. That was the whole thing that they were going to give. But the thing is now that there's a suspicion that Wagner now holds a tactical nuke. So that was one of the outcomes of one of the worries of that Wagner is now a nuclear power, and that was part of the payoff. So who knows what's going to go on there. Now, that's about it. We're into an hour and a half already now. And I know that Rob always goes to an hour, but it was a really interesting conversation having you all. Rosie.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Do my thing. I just wanted to thank you guys for being on the show. Thank you very, very much. It was incredibly informative. And thank you everyone who was watching in the chat, and make sure you hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. It definitely helps with the algorithms, especially if you put a comment in after we finished with the live. Go in the comments and just start putting comments in, especially now that all the bills, the Trudeau censorship bills have passed. I still don't know how he managed to just sneak those by without because even YouTube was fighting him on it. But anyway, so as I'm saying, it is an uphill battle. So thank you everyone who tuned in today, and thank you everyone who's going to be watching this later on. It is a half an hour longer than it normally is, but like like Jason said, this was a great chat. I'm really, really glad you two have met, and I hope you guys keep chatting too.
For sure.
Stay in touch with each other, because that's how we'll definitely, it's the networking that will get us through this in the end.
Yes.
Gotta stick together, stay united.
That's right. And we have discovered, like Rosie and I working together over all this time now, through being the admins, and not actually, well, for me, not physically being in any of the convoys or the occupations, but working together between the pair of us, we've been able to see a lot of similarities in the game plan. So it's really important that New Zealanders really, talk to and network with Canadians so they can both help each other. Because what I've sat here listening to both of you tonight, I've heard exactly the same things in either country.
Yeah, it was very refreshing to know what's going on in New Zealand and the similarities. So I thank you for having me on and introducing me to Rob here and Jay. Definitely love to come on again, and we'll stay in touch for sure.
Yeah. Thank you again. Thank you again too. I think it's all valuable, absolutely valuable.
Yep.
So on that note,
All right.
we don't have the outro to play this time, unless Jason, did you get your computer fixed
No,
up?
I didn't. I've fried a second computer. I'm on my third, but this one's not my media computer. So we don't have an outro today, but I can hum it if you like. But I'd just like to say thank you to everybody, and I will drop all the links to both Rob and Jason's Facebook pages in the chat after the live chat, because the live chat, I'll do it after the live chat, so it goes in the general chat area. So thank you very much, both of you, and I will exit you guys from the screen and let Rosie close up. Thanks very much, guys, and we'll talk to you on the internet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Oh, that was great. Thanks, Jason.
Awesome. Yeah, that was pretty neat. Yeah, I mean, I really do appreciate doing these, both countries, because man, there's so many similarities in what's going on.
That's what I noticed. That's absolutely what I noticed over a year ago, when the convoy was in Ottawa and the occupation was happening in the Freedom Village in Wellington. Both on Wellington, in Wellington, on Wellington. It was like two speakers playing the same song. Just one was just a little bit, ahead of the other, because the Canadians, of course, they got to Ottawa 6 days before.
Yeah.
And everything else,
like an echo, just like an echo,
It really was. It was the same playbook. It was the same playbook. I would see something happen in Ottawa, and then a couple of days later, I mean, even down to day 23, when the cops came in and started busting everybody up. Like, it was exactly the same. And it was just like, that was one of the biggest things that I took away from it. It was just like, we are all in this together, more than we even know. So that's hence the whole point of Between Two Flags.
And they're definitely running a timeline. They were definitely running a timeline. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people get caught up in the moment, and they don't take notice of these things. But fortunately for me, having not been 100% emotionally involved in it there on the ground, because it really did capture a lot of minds, the whole thing, really did capture a lot of minds. But being here, in my position, being able to observe from a sort of higher viewpoint, then looking down at the larger picture, being able to see what's going on in Canada, what's going on here. There are no two other countries that are the same. These two are almost identical, like twins. It's like the Titanic versus the Titanius.
You're the one who zoomed out because of where you are in Vietnam, and I'm the one who's like super zoomed in, because I do miss Ottawa. I have to confess. I miss it so much. I watch a couple of the live streamers, like Mr. Green Thumb Ottawa. He's just mentioned, he just said hi. But I love watching him when he's live on the hill. And of course, Chris Dacey with Dacey Media. Love watching him. It is quite an energy when you're there. And of course, the architecture is so beautiful. So hopefully I can get back out there at some point. But I've put some roots down here in Alberta now, and it's not as far as Colombia, but
stay in one place for a while and get settled. It helps out a lot. Although I may be on the move soon because the WEF have now turned their attention to Vietnam now. So the president of this country, prime minister, whatever they call him, they have a similar system to China, but not as extreme. I mean, we can use YouTube and Facebook here. They don't have that mass censorship system. We
Yeah.
don't have a social credit system yet. But now he's been summoned. He has been summoned by the grand overlords. I posted that this week. So 2 days ago, the story came out. So this week, what's today, the 27th, something like that. So this week they are going to be meeting. So are we tracking that and seeing what will happen in Vietnam? Up until now, they have dodged a bullet on all of this. And the old leader here, he seems to be pretty old school and has been rooting out he avoided the petrol thing. He took them to, he made them accountable, made all those corporations accountable for trying to set up a fuel crisis. He went after his own 2IC, second in charge, for the faulty PCR testing scam and making money, much like China did as well. China went through and did that as well. So until then, and they've completely avoided the whole sexualization and education process. It's still very conservative here, and very, very much the only normal place that I can see on the map, that in Cambodia next door. So
Yeah.
I don't know how this is going to go, but we'll find out in a few days.
Yep. So yeah, good luck with all of that in Vietnam. But on that note, we should wrap it up. We're reaching the it's an hour and 36 seconds now. So
yeah, we're out of here.
36 seconds. So, but yeah, thanks for jumping in here, Graham, from the Lincoln Kane chat. It was a quite unforgettable experience. So thanks for coming on, and yeah, again, don't forget to like the video, everybody. And Brian, thank you for being here. Canada, you need to know. Thank you so much. Thank you, Big Dice, for jumping in. And Tina Poon here. She lives very close to me. I'm really happy that I've got a friend like her, who's very just 15-minute drive away from here. So Bush Rider, appreciate your comments. And 6-1 Free, of course, always a pleasure to see you in the chat and to be on a panel with you. My friend Barb Ziegler, love you so much. There's one name here, Bong Farts for Jesus. As soon as I saw that, I don't know if you saw my face just bust out in this. I was trying so hard not to start giggling because that is just quite the name. So Hard Place, thank you very much for jumping in here. And Mima Flowers, of course. Chris with Musketeer Media. And yeah, appreciate you all. I'm sorry, I apologize if I've missed anybody here. But sending you so much love from Western-ish Canada. And of course, Jason being in Vietnam, I'm sure that you send your love to everybody who's been watching and anybody who commented. So thanks so much. Do you want to pull your jump up on here again, Jason? There you go. All right, with that, we will wrap it up. We don't have the outro, but we can just do a little all right. So thank you so much. And Jason, as always, it's been a pleasure. You stay safe in Vietnam, all right? And yes, you're muted. So Rubber Ducky, keep on trucking.
All right, Teddy. I'll give this a crack. It might not work, but I'll give it a crack anyway.
Sure, let's try to play the outro.
I'll give it a crack. This particular computer that I've got now has got a very sort of poor graphics card, so it's just for documents.
You did a great job with it. I'm really, really pleased. You just told me what to pick, and you worked I think you did 30 straight hours on it until you got it, until I was happy.
Yeah. It also helps if your systems don't end up getting fried. All
Just
right.
in.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So yeah. Okay. Let's just go. Yeah. Yeah. It's not adding. So. Oh, we got sound at least.
Okay, on that note, Jason, all the best. I will see you soon. And
All right.
we'll see everybody soon. Love you.
Take care, everybody, and keep voicing your issues.
Absolutely. Share your concerns.